I have to do the things that I can't not do. Have tough conversations with clients, architects, design teams to say, this is not a good idea, or this is not a good use of our resources or yours, or this is not a path that we should be going down. Could we? Yes, we could. But we have to say no to the things that we could say yes to, and only say yes to the things that we can't say no to.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Hey there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Bradley Hartman. I'm thrilled to bring to you today my conversation with Tyler Berns, partner at Birch Construction in Dallas, Texas. You're in for a treat. This was a ton of fun. We could have just been recording the audio from the minute we walked in here, because I was kind of, as I tend to do, talking about some of the issues that I'm currently dealing with our growing company, and he became immediately helpful. We talk about it in the podcast. We talk about leadership books. We talk about the culture that they've developed here based on intentionality and this framework that they use internally and set the expectations with their clients that they will always learn, that they will anticipate, and they will over-communicate. And we talk about that because there are pros and cons to over-communication, but in general, in the construction industry, over-communication is not the problem. It's an under-communication that leads to rework, that leads to all sorts of issues that ultimately undermine our profitability. Now, Tyler Berns is a co-founder and partner at Birch Construction. He got his undergrad at the University of Oklahoma, got his MBA at the University of Texas at Dallas. As for Birch Construction, they offer a full range of general contracting services under a variety of contractual arrangements, including construction manager, GC, design build, or design assist. They've been in business for 4 years and are growing. And in this episode, we talk about the different models of growth that they have and how they're trying to do that with intentionality. I'm going to quit rambling. You're in for a treat. It's going to be a great episode. I'm excited to share my conversation. A lot of laughs, a lot of energy, a lot of insights with Mr. Tyler Berns, partner at Birch Construction. As always, thank you for listening. Mr. Tyler Berns, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
I'm thrilled you made time for this, and I'm excited. I've got like 13 things, each that should take no more than 10 or 12 minutes. So I'm glad you just took off the rest of your Friday afternoon to spend it with me. We'll narrow this down, but there's just a ton, and I've gotten a lot, and you've already kind of helped me on a few things we've been struggling with. But I think where I want to start with you is take me back into your career. You're working at Austin, you're into pre-con, and someone says to you, my friend, I think you would be good in business development. Because when we initially met, I'm like, you're easy to talk to. I'm confident in my masculinity. You're a good looking guy. You have a wide range of business acumen. We talked about anything. I'm like, this is a sales guy. And I consider myself a sales guy too. So that's a compliment. I'm like, it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. And then you shared this story and I found fascinating. So maybe just kind of pick it up and take it from there.
Sure. So I got into business development almost begrudgingly. I had a mentor early on in my career who was a developer, well connected in town, lived down the street, long time, good friend, good mentor. And I set up breakfast with him and I said, I want to come talk to you about my career. I've got some questions for you. And my underlying thought here was, I'm going to go be a developer. That's the pinnacle. It's the grass is greener thing. If you want to succeed, that's where you go. And so I went to him and I said, just that, I want to be a developer. And he looked at me and he said, Is that why you called me here today? And I kind of sunk into my chair at Starbucks. I can remember it exactly. And I said, well, yes, sir. He goes, that's the dumbest thing you could have said to me. It's like, well,
yeah, why?
Thanks. And what he said after that made a whole lot of sense. And it really shifted the career trajectory that I've found myself on today. And I told him about this a couple of years ago. And he said, I didn't say that to you. It's funny how many people have impactful comments or messages to you that they don't ever think anything of. But he gave me an analogy and he said, Tyler, imagine yourself as a corn farmer because you've planted your seed. You've gone through school. You've gotten your degree. You've come out, you've spent a couple years in a construction company as a project engineer and a junior estimator. He says, you have planted that seed and you have seen the seedling sprout from the ground. And what you just said to me is time to harvest. He goes, you have put all this effort in and you will get nothing from it at this point. He said, my best bet to you is continue to cultivate your crop. The work that you've put in to learn this industry, continue to learn it. If you go try to be a developer right now, what are you going to do? Be their construction guy? I was at Austin at the time. He said, you're not even Austin Commercial's construction guy. You're not going to be their construction guy. You're going to do deals with them, but you don't have a finance degree. So you're going to be an analyst at best. You'll be below the intern. I said, okay. He said, you need to go back to Austin. You need to be thankful that they've given you the opportunities that they have, and you need to learn every aspect of that business that you can. And with that mentality, I leaned really into pre-construction. I learned as much as I could there. I took opportunities to go manage projects. And I was given phenomenal opportunities to manage great things. And that was what I was going to do. I was going to learn pre-construction. I was going to learn operations, and I was learning the business. And for a few years in a row, they'd come to me and they'd say, Tyler, you're doing a great job. We'd like for you to consider thinking about business development. And I always laughed at them and said, well, I appreciate that, but I'm not interested in that at all. I didn't understand the value that business development has. In my mind, we were Austin Commercial. You could beat your chest and say, we get opportunities because we're Austin. We win them because we're Austin. And those guys pay for bar tabs and make friends at Rangers games. How far from the truth I was. After further discussion and some other movement within the organization, leadership changes, I followed a leader from the pre-construction department over there and learned that what I had done I guess that was, I started with Austin in 2005. I moved over there in 2013. So I spent 8 years in operations and pre-construction. And that was enough to give me a solid base so that I could understand, at least at a fundamental level, what we do, how we help our clients. That is what it takes to be in business development or sales, in my opinion. Selling is solving. And you've got to be able to find ways to solve people's problems. And sometimes it's not just what they're looking to solve, it's who they need to solve them. The other thing that I did that I didn't ever think anything of until looking in hindsight, but I spent a lot of time and effort building a network of people in this industry, whether it was other general contractors, subcontractors, architects, engineers, bankers, whoever it was. I built meaningful relationships with them. And sometimes the best thing you can do in sales is just connect those people.
Yes, absolutely. Now, quick question here. Part of this seems, based on our interaction, part of this seems just kind of who you are. Was there a level of kind of intentionality about, I'm going to spend a little more time, because sometimes we'll all say, hey, why aren't we building more connections, more nodes in this network? And a lot of times the answer is I'm too busy, right? So how did you think about that because at this point, I'm guessing you're in your early 30s. How intentional was that? Or was this just like, it's kind of who you are? And you knew on a long enough timeline, more networks, more friends, more people that care is only going to benefit you.
You know, you said something though that always strikes a chord with me. It said, I'm too busy. And the way I interpret I'm too busy these days is from a victim mentality. When you say I'm too busy, generally, I believe that to come from a place where you say, this is happening to me. I've been given too much to take on. I'm spread too thin. This is happening to me. And I think if you remove yourself from the victim mentality and you realize that growth comes from a place of discomfort, I'm too busy is sometimes, I'll call it like this, it's a cop-out to say, I can't take on anymore. But if you manage your work differently, sometimes the way we manage our work creates more work. If you manage your work differently or with more intention, set different priorities, you'll find that you're not too busy to reprioritize. And sometimes I think the other side of that is that it can be a comfortable place to say, going into a room of complete strangers or an intimidating setting does not sound comfortable to anybody. As much as you and I might feel like we thrive in that setting, you go into a cold room where you don't know a soul, it can be intimidating. What you have to learn is that everybody else in there started from the same place. And generally the reason that they're in that room is if it's a networking event, it's because they want to network with other people. They want to add value to their network, or they want to seek a solution if it's a sales setting. They're there to hear what you can offer them. When you remove yourself from the victim mentality of I'm too busy, and you take away the excuse and you put yourself into a place of discomfort, and you really lean into it, all of a sudden you'll see doors open and you'll see real growth. It's just like working out at the gym.
Obviously, I can't stand hearing people say I'm too busy stuff. And I know the victim mentality. I've never really connected those two. And I think if you do, all of a sudden, I can imagine if you say this here with your team as part of the culture, people know that, well, nobody wants to fall into the victim mentality. And if I say that out loud, that ain't good. Well, where we started, part of why we do this podcast is to really help me just be better, to find smart people and ask them. But I asked you about, as you guys have grown, how you say no to things. You just kind of smiled and leaned back and said, oh man, we could go on this. You told a really powerful story. I thought that really resonated with me. You preceded that by saying, if you say yes to everything on a long enough timeline, you just get your ass kicked by that. And then I think somebody modeled how to say no really well. Do you mind sharing that?
Sure. You're right. If you try to be all things to all people, you end up being nothing to anyone. If you spread yourself too thin, you can't be great at everything. You really have to focus on first where your strengths are, and you have to work towards those strengths. And that means only saying yes to the things that you can't say no to.
Say that again, because I think it's really important. When you said it to me the first time, I literally had to write this down. I'm like, wait a minute, that makes sense. Say that again.
You have to learn to say no to the things that you can say yes to, and say yes to only the things that you can't say no to. There's a double negative in there.
There is.
Did you follow me?
Just barely. But yeah, and when I hear you say that, I'm thinking about it's either a hell yes or it's a no, right? You got to carve out and protect the space, things that you can't not say yes to, right? You have to, because that's where you want to grow. So yes, totally makes sense.
Well, and one of the things that I know you talk about in your podcast that we see in our industry is what got you here won't get you there. And certainly from a leadership standpoint, you got to this point in your leadership journey because you're good at these tasks. You're good at these items. What got you here won't get you there. If I'm a project manager, what got me to this point was I was great at RFIs. I was great at submittals. I was great at writing subcontracts. But if I want to be a senior project manager or project executive, I can't continue to write RFIs. I have to do the things that I can't not do. Have tough conversations with clients, architects, design teams to say, this is not a good idea, or this is not a good use of our resources or yours, or this is not a path that we should be going down. Could we? Yes, we could. But we have to say no to the things that we could say yes to, and only say yes to the things that we can't say no to.
So you had some connection with someone who's on a project. And I just find myself, it's a fastball down the middle. I want to say yes. I firmly believe I want to deliver more value. I want them saying, hey, our scope of work is X, and they delivered X plus Y plus Z. However, increasingly, as we've grown, my team is like, stop. Especially when I'm delegating this extra work and they're like, we are already busy. Stop. This is not what we're trying to do. So you were in a meeting recently, what did this third party do to basically kind of bail you out on that?
This was fantastic. So we're working with a client right now. We were awarded a project, and it's a large lab project. So it's a complex, fast-paced project, high risk, high reward kind of thing. And the owner, the client, is eager. She represents a huge organization, and they're building a large facility here. There's a lot of changes. You've got to meet the program. You've got to fit in the budget. And she looked at us and she said, all right, what if we change this? We delete this room. We minimize this. And in my problem-solving selling mentality, I'm listening to her. I'm not. I'm saying, yes, 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 we can do that. We can do that. We can do that. She goes, okay, great. Can you tell me what that value would be? And I said, you got it. And in my mind, I've got a team, a whole pre-construction team, and I can go back to the office and say, hey guys, need your help with this. The best thing that the third-party project manager said was she stopped and she looked at the owner, and the owner's name is Doreen. She said, Doreen, I'm going to stop you right there. Tyler and his team are not going to do that. This is a half-baked idea. We need to get all the facts out first. We need to work with the design team to see, does it even work from a space planning, from a code compliance planning standpoint, before Tyler and his team go spend a week or 2 weeks worth of man-hour time to solve this problem that isn't really a problem worth solving at all. And her ability to protect our time on my behalf is going to move the project forward much faster and in a much more productive way. And it was that one powerful word to lead it all off. No. That's a tough thing to say to a client.
Yes. I'm always interested in how other leaders model this, because I can understand it intellectually. And I can even imagine myself saying it, maybe. But you're in that moment. I got a long, to your point, part of what got us here is going above and beyond and saying yes, right? I've got all this habit is here. I need someone to like model that. When you said that, I'm like, okay, that's what it looks like. My guess is she didn't burn any bridges. And by the way, I'm the king of half-baked ideas. Some of them, when they fully baked, turned out to be really good ideas. But I'm throwing out half-baked ideas to my team all the time. So just to kind of hear the way that she framed that, we're like, no, bad idea. Like, okay, that is how that is modeled. That's really powerful.
It really is. And it's unique in that standpoint too. Typically, that's what differentiates a really strong manager in my standpoint, whether it's our team or in this case, it was third party. But specifically on third party, when they don't have skin in the game, it's not their estimating team. They don't know the dozen other projects that my team are working on right now. She just was really being thoughtful of everybody's time and resources and not saying yes to the things you could say yes to, only the things that you can't say no to.
Yeah. So let's talk about, we talked about your growth and how you want to grow. And you navigated your way to sharing your goal is to be the pre-trash can Astros. tell me and tell the audience more about that.
Well, that's an important clarifier, pre-trash can
It is.
Astros.
Absolutely.
If you use baseball as an analogy, there are two proven ways to win. And in baseball, it's you win the World Series. Take two teams, for example, the pre-trash can, Houston Astros, and the New York Yankees. If you think about building a team, as they did, they went about it two distinctly different ways. The Yankees bring on high power, high productivity talent quickly, and that comes with a cost. And they typically have the highest payroll in baseball. It's proven to work. How many,
27?
They have? Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah.
The Astros, in their latest rise to success, and they've stayed there, trash cans are not, happen a different way. They built their system through the farm system with real intentionality in instilling their culture to their players. They've focused on the draft. They've focused on the farm league. And that's what our focus is you've always heard, don't grow too fast. And boy, when we were starting this business, I must have heard that more times than I can count. And at the time, you kind of shrug it off and say, that's ridiculous. We'll grow plenty fast. Don't worry about me. And when you watch peers that grow too fast, when I've been a part of organizations that have taken on more work than they can execute, they have put people in positions that they might not have been prepared for. That's when you underserve clients. That's when you underserve your employees. If you put them in a position where they're likely to fail, that's not good for anybody. And so if you build your team with intentionality around and number one, getting the right people on the bus first, and then being really intentional about putting those right people in the right seats, that takes time and it takes development, and that's natural growth.
So you mentioned intentionality. Let's shift to Birch Thirst. I think the first time we met you, I do believe there's a couple cocktails involved. So I'm running in, I'm like, look at this guy. He's just building a construction company around alcohol. Interesting. And then, of course, I read through it, and Thirst is an acronym. I want to hit on the I in intentionality, but maybe just run through what are those, let me count them, 6 letters. What are the kind of, and I'm assuming these are your core values. Run through those. Let's dive right into kind of intentionality and this is what bad podcast hosts do, by the way. I'm going to ask you to do 2 things, and we're going to do them back to back. I'm going to say them one time up front. I want to dig into intentionality and kind of how you coach and train that. But let's start with the Thirst model.
So Thirst, it's an acronym, stands for trustworthy, honest, intentional, responsive, strength, and team. And there's obviously meaning behind each one of those words, and we can go into that, but for sake of time, we'll leave it there. What I think is most important about this is if you're going to build anything, a organization, a team, a family, whoever it is, the first thing that you have to do is look and define who you are. And this was a hugely impactful exercise for us. We hired a third-party organization that basically did a 360 assessment of who Tyler and Matt Smith are as the founding partners. They interviewed our employees. They interviewed architects, clients, subcontractors. They interviewed people that chose not to work with us, clients that didn't award us work. And they said, what about this organization that these guys are building draws you to them or what might not. And they helped us establish these. And that gives everybody kind of a unified drumbeat to march to. And we can tie back whether it's jobs that we pursue, whether it's clients that we take on, employees we hire, performance reviews, whatever it is, we can tie it back to THIRST, the acronym here.
So as you're kind of thinking and planning about that growth, you brought up a book that I have not read. I have it. I will read it. Simon Sinek, The Infinite Game. And you said, it seems to me like the construction industry in the United States, where you guys compete with, is the antithesis of the infinite game. Say more about that.
So I always laugh at this. There we go. I laughed right now.
You proved it.
Literally laughing. When you talk to someone about the fact that you work for a construction company or you own a construction company, without fail, if it's not the absolute first question they ask you, it's number 2 or 3. Well, how big are you? And what they mean by that is, what's your revenue? And what they mean by that is, what is your revenue in the last 12-month period? That says nothing of, what are your values? How effective is your team? What do clients say about you? Do subcontractors and trade partners like to work with you? No, it says you contracted this amount of work. You may have or may have not executed it.
You may or may not have made any money on that.
That's exactly right. And what's interesting is we all pound our chest, and that has become the scoreboard and the measure of how great you are as an entity. And I just fundamentally think that's garbage. If you read, I'm a big fan of just about all things Simon Sinek, and The Infinite Game happened to be a book I read just before Matt and I founded the company. And at the root, there's the definition of a finite game is there's a start, there's a set of rules, and there's an end, a determined set of players. And by the end, based on those parameters, there is a determined winner and there are determined losers. The infinite game is what we look to model our firm after. And if you think about it, it's Asian culture when you talk about companies that are decades and centuries old. You think about it in terms of the tree farmer who plants a seed and may never harvest his crop, but he plants it for future generations within that firm. That's what we're working to do here. You will never find Birch Construction in the Dallas Business Journal's book of list ranking contractors by revenue, top line revenue for the last 12 months. It doesn't speak to if you're a great firm, a poor firm, or otherwise. So
let's sit on books here for a minute. I'm a book nerd. I write a lot, and therefore I always get a little nervous. I was like, all right, if I'm putting my own thoughts on page and trying to be intelligent, trying to share those with people, shame on me if I'm not reading other smart people to challenge my thinking. Just walking through your office, I saw a couple, Ryan Holiday, I saw Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership, and then over in the corner here, there was a whole lineup of books, and you very generously gave me one on one of the issues I'm struggling with. Has this just kind of naturally come about because of you and Matt, and then added people that had it? But I feel like there's a lot of people in this industry that are kind of like, get a book, huh? How long is it? Who are just like, oh, I haven't read a book since high school. I'm like, listen, I get it. Reading's not for everyone. However, some way we need to find our way, find a path to continue to educate ourselves and learn more about the world, continue development, things like that. So how deliberate and intentional was that? Or is this, you guys are attracting the same people? And I mean, literally, there's like 8 different desks and there were multiple books on those desks. They could have been staged because I'm coming here. I doubt that. So maybe just talk to me about that kind of the culture that you're developing here.
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying that it's not staged.
You jerk. To even suggest it.
What's really neat is if you look at a lot of the desks, there's a lot of the same titles. And this is something that neither Matt nor I instilled in the company or said or mandated that this is something we're going to do. But we have leaders in the company who have taken it upon themselves to start an informal book club. And so we identify titles together and we meet every few weeks here in this room. We host it online for people on job sites that want to join. And the whole goal of this is to have a shared experience, expanding our understanding, mind, and really creating shared language around fundamentals that we think will make the company better. I'm with you. I was a poor student growing up. It really took off during grad school where I had kind of a thirst for learning. And that's where books, I'm a tangible, read a book, highlight, dog ear kind of guy. And I'm with you. We've all got a stack of books sitting on the bedside table or on your desk, wherever it is that someone's given you. And sometimes it can be a challenge with everything going on in different seasons of your life, whether we're too busy. But I think if you make a priority of it, what I realized is I have 2 young kids. We read to both of them every night for generally 30 minutes or so. And I realized if I can do that for them, I can do that at least for myself, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes a day somewhere, just to kind of, I think it's the constant introduction of new ideas or reiterating known ideas. It's funny, if you ever read a book more than once, you get totally different things out of it.
Oh, yes. 100%.
I mean, every time. And so I think sometimes just based on what you're going through, whether it's personal, professional, or otherwise, hearing someone's take on similar things helps you gain clarity. What's fun about the culture in our company is that when other people are reading similar books or hear that you have an issue and they can hand you a book and say, oh, you know what, read chapter 3. Sometimes a 200-300 page book can be intimidating, but if you build a culture of everybody trying to lift everybody else up, it gets easier. You link arms, you do it together.
Yeah. Well, I've just realized that there's been a lot of really smart people over the millennia who've had experiences. Many of those are of the human variety that we all have. And they took the time to say, hey, if you're getting your ass kicked with this, try this or this. Like, nothing we're going through is new, right? And if you're struggling, here's an option, right? So take a minute to do that. And I agree, even if it's just 5 pages a day, if you do that for a month or 2, you're getting through a book, right? But let's talk about over communication. Tell you what, I'm just going to leave it right there. I'm not going to ramble on. Take over communication. That's on your website as part of, and you're going to help me out here. You're going to learn, anticipate, and over communicate. Is that it? Take it from there and talk about over communication.
That's the Birch how. That's what we call it. It's the how. It's how we operate. Everything we do can be measured back to the how. If you think about it in terms of our job as a manager of construction is to eliminate or reduce the impact of surprises on a project. That's why we pour into and invest what we do in pre-construction. It's why we put the capable teams we do on projects. There are going to be problems. There are going to be surprises. The more we can avoid them up front by preparing or planning for them, or minimize their impact by anticipating them, is what helps make our jobs run smoother, better for our clients. Learn, anticipate, over communicate. Learn could be anything. It could be reading books, making sure that you're prepared, going to school, making sure that you're asking questions. Why this? What's important here? Discovery type questions. It can be just listening more than you talk, but learn. And because you've learned, you take that and you turn it into anticipation. Okay, he said this is going to be important to them. I anticipate that we're going to have to do X, Y, and Z to make sure we achieve that goal to them. And then I'm going to over communicate to my team internal, to my team external, to all stakeholders of the project of this is important. We've learned this. We anticipate that in order to make sure that this is addressed, this is going to happen. And we over communicate it by putting it in print, putting it in email, putting it on the bulletin board, whatever it is. But very few people, in my belief, wake up in the morning saying, how can I take advantage of this guy? How can I underserve this person? It typically boils down to just that. Learn, anticipate, over communicate. And it generally boils down to, even if you learned and anticipated, the effectiveness of your communication between everybody.
How do you model that when my mind goes to email and some clients, love them. We have some family members, love them. They specialize in writing 1,000-word emails. And it's like, oh no paragraph breaks. There's no white space, man. It is just text. And then it's like, scroll, like, scroll. That is obviously one example of over communication that would be a negative. How do you model what's the Goldilocks just right level of communication? And what does that look like when you coach it and you train it and you say, that's exactly what we're talking about? Great job.
Well, you're exactly right. This is business development, but business development is a lot of things. It's selling, and selling is solving. If you want to solve someone's problems, the first thing you have to do is put yourself squarely in their shoes to the best that you can. You got to think about if you were on the receiving end of this communication, how would you receive it? And boy, you're right. Think about how we all triage our email inboxes. I mean, you and I are sitting in here and your inbox has probably got a couple hundred emails by the time you get out of here.
Triage is the correct word. Yes.
And what that means is if you're like me and you open an email and it's 3 to 5 paragraphs, what I do is I mark it as unread and I'll get back to it when I, quote, have the time. And we all have just an abundance of time later. What you have to realize is that people go through communications much like we do a social media feed. It's a scroll, scroll, scroll. And if something grabs your interest, you stop. Maybe then you click through the pictures or you read the caption. But you got to have a headline in there. Go to the Weather Channel. They're great at this. Look at their little advertisements. You know what I'm talking about probably, but I don't. It's the Channel 5 news. When we come back, learn what you could do to prevent this, or 98% of households are doing this and it could kill your entire family. Yes. Stay tuned to learn how.
Right.
And you're, oh gosh, I got to figure out what's going on here. You got to focus on brevity, impact and brevity. You've got to grab their attention first. You also have to understand that depending on how they receive that information is going to dictate how they absorb it, where it sinks in. Most of us these days are flipping through our cell phones. We provide a set amount of communication on each of our projects every week, and we've identified 7 ways that we do it. Every project, without fail, the exact same 7 ways. There's additional ways beyond that, but that is a bare minimum, and it has to do with your standard communications, meeting minutes, your OAC meetings, emails. But we go through each one of these and we give the same information 7 different ways because everybody receives communication differently. And you have to think, who am I communicating to and how do they receive information? You might be a text guy. The person down the hall is an email person. The other person's a phone call person. Sometimes you have to do all 3. Sometimes you just need to know your audience.
Yeah. Well, that's KYA, right? We do all this and we're like, well, often the way we communicate is the way we prefer to be communicated with. And we had a kind of a funny example. We had somebody reach out to us a prospect, call it. I passed it off to a colleague and she called and it went right to voicemail. Voicemail's full. She texted him and he was like, listen, my voicemail's broken. Not going to fix it. Voicemails are for 70-year-olds. And my colleague called me. She said,
70-year-olds also.
She said, she's just curious. Are you 70 and use a voicemail? I'm like, is opting out of voicemail an option? And so we had this kind of conversation. It was somewhat comical and I called him, whatever. That is what it is. But in that circumstance, I was thinking, what about your customers? You tell me you don't have any customers that use the phone and use the voicemail? I find that hard to believe. But again, it's thinking, hey, it's not about me. It's not about me. It's about them. And yes, I'm sure someone had said, this is annoying. I'm having the 3rd conversation in the same way, but in a different medium. Face-to-face, on a phone call, in an email. Maybe I'm texting this guy. But to your point, it's not about you. Do what you got to do. Your job is to communicate. If you fail to communicate, that's on us, right? And I'm like, for you guys too, it's like on the job site, imagine for some folks that want to put a target on your back, you're putting it right on your website saying, this is what we will do. But it also sends a message to everybody in here that, hey, when we talk about spending the extra time to communicate in different mediums, this is why. So,
have you ever heard the acronym OHIO?
Only handle it once?
Only handle it once.
That mainly works I'm trying to think of when I try to clean the house, but yes.
Well, if we go full circle back to what we talked about before, when people say I'm too busy, how many times do we mishandle something?
Yeah.
And then we have to handle it twice, 3 times, 4 times.
Yeah.
Oh, this subcontractor didn't come on site this day with the right material. Well, could we have anticipated or planned better on the front where that wouldn't have happened? Well, now I've got a fire drill. I don't have time for X, Y, and Z because I'm handling this 2 or 3 times. The problems typically get bigger the longer out they draw, so you got to handle it once. And if you think about it in a more simpler term in communication, think about scheduling a lunch with somebody. You and me want to go to lunch with each other. So I reach out to you. I say, hey, Bradley, saw each other at the board meeting the other day. I really want to grab lunch with you. And I leave it there. And you email back, that'd be great. I'd love to have lunch. Can you send me some dates? Yeah, sure. Okay, now we're on communication number 3. Okay, well, here's some dates. Okay, great. Get a date pinned out. All right, where are you coming from? I'm coming from here. Where are you coming from? I'm coming from here. Okay, now we're on 6. Okay, well, You want to do Chinese? No, I'm allergic to this. Okay. Well, we just want lunch. So if you think about the right amount of information that can condense an email thread of, I just talked about 8 to 10 back and forths, and you checking your calendar, me checking my calendar, me looking at the maps, and then looking at a list of restaurants, and condense it. You don't want to be too presumptuous. You got to understand who your audience is. But if I said, hey, Bradley, love to do lunch. I've got these dates coming up in the next few weeks. I'm going to be coming from my office. I know your office is here because I took 3 minutes to look at your email signature. There's a great spot down the road. Can we do one of these dates? We'll do this restaurant. You'd say, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do this date. 2 emails.
Well, I think that just speaks to you're anticipating. We know the most probable steps we're going to have to figure out if we're using email as the medium for this, right? I want to make sure we hit on this because it's a little more tactical, but I think it's so powerful, especially when you guys are pursuing new work. My guess is 100 hours here, 200 hours there, maybe a little go back, throw in 25 hours here, there. For you guys to put together a proposal that you think can win that work is a huge investment, and that's part of the risk, right? And we were just kind of talking about, which I think our industry in general does a terrible job with. We do all this work, we kick our own asses, we go back and forth, we spend all this time, we wrangle with each other to get the best thing. We identify problem areas, and then we package it all together and we put it in an email, and what do? We hit send. And you're like, this is the most important part of this whole thing. And you said, well, I won't steal the headline, but you said, oh, real easy. We present, we what?
Present, don't send.
Tell me about that and how do you guys execute that? Because when I share this with some of our clients, and for me, it's about you got to get in early. If you are saying, hey, I got to present this proposal to you, and basically the deadline's 48 hours from now, well, that's a you problem. But if you ask 90 days in advance, they'll probably be like, oh, no, that makes sense. You guys are putting in 200 hours worth of work on this. So how do you develop that? And what does that look like from the internal kind of leadership standpoint?
One of my favorite quotes in the whole world is Henry Ford. He said, as he developed the Model T, if I would have asked my customers what they needed, they would have said,
the faster horse.
They needed a faster horse. We'd all be riding around faster horses today, right? When you think about the traditional mindset of even a knowledgeable developer, which is our client, they have a mindset of this is what I need. And sometimes they're brilliant and they're spot on. They know it. They might even know better than you do. Sometimes they might be asking for a faster horse. And if you send, you don't talk through or really discover what the root problem is that you're trying to solve, you're going to deliver them a faster horse. We're trying to invent the Model T here. And what that means is it starts with discovery. A little bit of tangent from your question here, but if you go to a business lunch or a business meeting, and afterwards I say, hey, how'd it go? And you say, it was phenomenal. In my experience, typically what that means is you got to say everything you wanted to say. And if you ask the other person how it went, unless they were fascinated on the edge of their seats of what you wanted to tell them,
doesn't happen to me.
It was fine. It was fine. It was another meeting. Where you can be really impactful is when you really, really, really start from a listen first mentality. We use the word discovery here. Really understand, ask meaningful questions, be vulnerable in that you don't know what the solution is yet because you might not know what the problem is. If you can understand what their real problems are, you might come up with a more creative solution than they even knew. So especially in our business where people give these clearly defined out RFPs, here's what you'll answer. You'll fill in this blank and this is what you'll put it in this order. They're asking sometimes for a faster horse. If you send that over, you're not moving the needle. You're not raising the bar. If you present and don't send, you present your ideas, you present your thoughts, how you're really identifying what their issues and their problems are and how your proposal solves them. Now you're making meaningful conversation and meaningful progress forward.
Well, I found too, and I think what you're describing really gets to that, is when you can help people articulate or identify or communicate their underlying assumptions for getting to this point, sometimes just that process is, well, why are we doing it this way? Full stop. Let the silence do the work. It might be because we've done this on the last couple projects. Have the last couple projects been really successful in this facet? Well, not really. Okay, right? So it's like there's hundreds, if not thousands of assumptions that are baked in here. And maybe we've talked about 5% of them. And I love the Model T reference too, is because Do you know why it was called the Model T? It's because they went through Model A, B, C. They literally went through. How do they do that? Well, they went in and kind of talked to the customers, went back. That ain't it, right? And until they got to the T, then it was like, all right, we're going to paint this in black. We're going to make 1 million of them, right? So, well, I just love that. I think it's just so important too, is that all the energy and effort and creativity gives you guys a chance to, even if you say, all right, I'll give you 20 minutes, you're going to be able to get a better experience, get some feedback from them than you would if you just sent over the PDF or whatever.
That's right.
For sure.
You also, it goes right back to what we were talking about. Now you're just in the email inbox triage.
Correct. Yes.
What do we do when we don't have enough time because we're not going to read the 20 pages that you send over for the week's worth of detail that you put in there? You open, you click the attachment, you scroll all the way to the bottom, you find that little bold number down there.
What's the number?
And you go, okay, well, now all you are is you're this number. And all of us say we're more than a number. Full stop, right? We're more than a number. We're not a low number guy. Well, if all you are to them is a number, then you've failed.
Act accordingly. There you go. All right. I'm watching the time. We're going to have to do a round 2 at some point here. There's like half the stuff I said I want to talk to you about. We really didn't get to here.
It's the story of my life.
I will. Maybe we'll close where kind of we started here. I kind of asked you about some of my own kind of challenges on kind of saying no. And you very generously and thoughtfully said, I got a book for you. You ran out and you came back. You brought me a book. So maybe tell me what book you gifted me. And then is there a book, as you look back kind of your leadership career, either a book that you've either gifted to people more than others, or is there a book that you say, other than The Infinite Game, which we talked about, that you say, kind of either accelerated your leadership growth or really maybe changed it by what you had read and kind of absorbed?
So we have it's required reading at Birch.
Okay.
And it's Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership. Just if you take that mentality of, it goes back to the victim mentality. This is happening because these people are doing it to me. Flip that on its head. What could I have done differently to make sure that this happened a different way? The outcomes would have been different. That's an extreme ownership standpoint mentality. We've bought it for every employee that's ever worked for us. I've given away cases of them. It's a fantastic book. If you're not a reader and you're an Audible person, they narrate it. It's fantastic. They sound like Navy SEALs.
Yeah, they do. Right. Exactly. I did it again. I gave you 2 questions at the same time. What book did you give me?
Oh, I'm sorry. So I gave you Essentialism.
Essentialism. And why?
Years ago, I was struggling with, I was saying yes to everything. I think I was on 6 different boards. I was starting a nonprofit. I was taking on more responsibilities. I was going into grad school. I said yes to everything. And Amazon must have been listening, and they recommended.
No kidding.
Yeah, they did. It was just on a whim, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot. It was Essentialism, and I read that, and I did. I bought a case of them, and I handed them out to everybody, and I was like, this was a life changer for me. And I've said this to a lot of people, but the best analogy is they say, go into your closet at home and do an inventory of all the clothes in there. This is what happens in our lives. I still have polo because I'm the same size that I was in high school.
Finish that thought.
I still have polo shirts in my closet that are from high school.
That's awesome.
That I haven't worn
since
high school. And I know that I won't wear them, but you know what? They're still in my closet. And that's the inability to say no to things. To take that shirt, remove it from your closet, and only focus on the things that are a priority to you. And the exercise here is do that with your entire life. Don't just do it with your family. Don't do it with work. Do it with your entire life at a personal level. What is important to you? Take out all the old shirts that you're never going to wear, the pants that don't fit you anymore. And now you're not going to be, quote, too busy.
Well, man, I think that's a great place to end. I will just say the phrase you brought up a couple of times is, read something good, I bought a case of them. I'm like, in the grand scheme of things, what are the odds that in your business, you're going to buy a case of a book that resonated with you and you are going to say, I wish I could get that $250 back. Like, I wish I didn't buy those paperback copies of Essentialism. Like,
right.
Of all the way we spend money, that is never going to come back to haunt you. So you mentioned that a couple of times. I think that's great modeling for a lot of leaders that are out there, including myself. So Tyler, I appreciate your time. I think this is a great place to end. Why don't we close out with our leadership mantra?
I'm Tyler Berns, partner at Birch Construction. You are owed nothing. Deliver value first.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Tyler Berns, partner at Birch Construction in Dallas. There were so many things I didn't get to. At some point, we're going to have to do a round 2 with Tyler and dig into some of the insights that he shared that didn't make this conversation. If you did get value from this conversation, please rate and review us on whatever podcast platform you are listening to. That means more to us than you know, as we look to grow our audience and bring in new ideas and new people from around the country to ultimately build a more profitable, enjoyable construction community.